Larry, you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
You would think after 20 months of this online world that I would learn to check to make sure I'm not on mute before I start. But no. So here we go. Thank you for joining us. It's 10:25. We're going to get back at her into the agronomy section. This is where I could not ask for more input, or this is where I'd like to ask for more input on what we did and what your thoughts are on it, because this is where that dialogue and that feedback from other growers is so important to challenge us on what we learned so that we can all learn together. Number one thing I want to share is within these trials, we do our best to ensure that all variables are equal. There's circumstances where that is not the case, but we do try. So keeping in mind, always there's a logistics component to the trials, and we try to do them in a way that's the best balance between logistics and achieving accurate results. Therefore, we'll jump into it. And first up, which is near and dear to my heart and a topic that I enjoy speaking to, and also a topic that Connor brought to the Pea Seed farm table discussion, is subsoiling. We, moving through 2017 and 2018, we're constantly seeing our soils in dry conditions. Despite having moisture, our crop's not able to pull moisture out. So we're trying to ask ourselves why. What are something we can do? Therein lies our subsoiling trial, which we've started. And we began subsoiling in the fall of 2019 after we harvested 50 bushel faller wheat. We went out to this field and we subsoiled about 300 acres out of 320. And then we grew soybeans on it the next year. And I'm going to quickly breeze through this slide showing you the results that we saw in our soybeans in 2020. Keeping in mind the year of 2020, we subsoiled. The fall of 2019, we received 10 inches of precipitation. We filled our soil back up. The growing season of 2020 was dry. And so this is an NDVI time lapse of our soybeans on this field. As we move into June 19th, our NDVI image begins to show less vegetation where we did not subsoil than where we did subsoil. Every week, June 29th, less vegetation where we did not subsoil. There's something going on here. All the way through the growing season, July 9th, July 14th, July 24th, July 29th, August 3rd. You can see this strip on a 45-degree angle in the field. Here's a better one. August 8th, soybeans are starting to shut down because they're in drought symptoms. And we see less vegetation than where we don't subsoil. Here's a picture of the headland that we subsoiled on another field. You can clearly see the vegetation difference in mid-July where we subsoiled versus where we didn't. So we think we're onto something. Again, more pictures of it coming up, but I'm flying through this because this is 2020. This is old news. There's the line. There's where we did not subsoil inside this purple strip. There's our harvest maps, and there's our yield potential. 7.8 bushel gain where we subsoiled versus where we did not in soybeans in 2020. Now let's move into 2021. It was our goal to evaluate this trial that we did for 3 years in a row. 2021 was the second year on this field after subsoiling. We seeded oats on this field, and we measured it in the exact same way we did the first year. First, by taking a look June and July and August at our NDVI satellite imagery, looking at our green vegetation index. And July 9th, starting to see a little bit less vegetation in our oats where we subsoiled 2 years previous. Again, July 14th, starting to show itself. July 24th, showing itself even more prominent. Again, think about oats July 24th. What are they doing? They are getting plump. They're filling out milk stage. Water uptake is so crucial. July 29th, very evident. August 3rd, staying the same line of where we did not subsoil versus we did. And here are the results. These are weighed with a weigh wagon. We took a strip on each side of the subsoiled versus not subsoiled, weighed it, and took an average. And what did we see in our oats in 2021? A 6.5 bushel per acre gain in Summit oats on that whole strip. So flabbergasted, shocked, surprised. I don't know if there's any words that really describe how one operation can have that big of impact 24 months in advance. Here is a detailed picture of our contoured yield map, showing just the degree of difference in yield. Even where the yield was more poor on one side of the field, it was even poorer where we did not subsoil. The next slide I'm going to show you, this was us analyzing the results with Enns Brothers Farm Forward program. We had weather stations in this field through the crop intelligence programs with Enns Brothers as well. So shout out to them for helping us collect these results and measure them. And I got lots more of work they did with us that you're going to see these results. A lot of them is coming from analyzing the results in this program. And here's using the data from the combine. Again, even showing on these strips, on those little specific strips within the trial, an even higher degree of yield where we subsoiled versus where we did not. Anywhere from 17 to 20 bushels on those specific strips coming out of the combine. So the question now poses to ourselves is this going to show itself in 2023 when we grow canola on this field? So we got canola planned for this field. We are going to plunk our crop intelligence soil moisture probes in the exact same spots that we had them in the soybeans and the oats and the canola to try to evaluate if our roots are going deeper, earlier, and accessing more moisture. And I'm going to jump back to the soil moisture probe data in just a little bit. And then what I want to share with you is, obviously, I promised everyone that we were going to repeat the exact same trial in soybeans because I didn't believe that we could get a 7.8 bushel gain in soybeans again. I just felt it was too perfect of a condition to get that yield gain from subsoiling just 12 months previous. So that's what we did. We're jumping over to another field now. This is field 25 and 26 at Pea Seeds. It is a 290 acre field. Again, we subsoiled about 280 acres. This is only a 10 acre strip that was unsubsoiled last fall. Last fall, we harvested wheat. We subsoiled. 2 weeks later, we came back with a pro-till, evened out the top, prepped the field for seeding conditions the next year. Remember that. We subsoiled, 2 week gap, and then went over the field with the pro-till to make it seed bed ready for soybeans the spring of 2021. So the question, could we repeat it? We measured it exact same way. Soil probes, where we subsoiled versus where we did not. Then we started measuring using satellite imagery. Can we see a line show up in the field with a difference in vegetation. Moving through July, no difference. Into August, maybe starting to see a little bit, but maybe we're looking too hard to find something. Move into September 7th. Now we got something. Now we see a difference, but it's not the difference we should be seeing. What we saw was where we did not subsoil, we had more vegetation showing up on the satellite imagery. You can see it on this angle right here. Where we did not subsoil, it appeared to be more vegetation. As we move into the end of September, same story. So now we're thinking, did we just shoot ourselves in the foot? I want to speak to conversations that I've had with other growers who are subsoiling, and they saw the same thing. I'm going to jump back to that 2-week period. We set the subsoiler out 10 to 12 to 13 inches deep, depending on the field. That slot was opened up and we dried out the field more. And on a year where we never got a full recharge of that soil saturation, we had more of a detriment. That's what cultivation does. It dries the soil out, and that's what it did. So the question we're asking ourselves now is, how much did we lose? Not did we gain anything? How much did we lose? This next slide, this is the exact same slide I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. But now you can key in on these probes in the subsoiling trials on both the oat field and the wheat field. And you can see that in the soybeans, where we did not subsoil at July 5th, those probes were showing it had more moisture in the ground available to the crop than where we subsoiled. So it's showing on July 5th, the story was already being told before visible symptoms were present of drought. Then we reached a period where the soybeans that we did not subsoil actually were able to dry out and pull more moisture, assuming from deeper down in the profile than where we subsoiled. And then on August 20th, we had 2.5 inches, which recharged our subsoil to some extent. On the oats, the story that it showed on the soil probes were exactly as we would suspect. We got a yield gain out of our oats where we subsoiled, which means it accessed more moisture and pulled more moisture from the soil profile than where we did not subsoil. And that gap right here turned into 6.5 bushels. So what were the results of that soybean trial in 2021? Again, here's where we did not subsoil. There's our yield map. And the difference we had was not as much as I thought, but it was also under 20 bushels an acre. So would that yield loss have been bigger if we had more adequate yields? Potentially. So now we're sitting in a position where 1 year, perfect scenario, perfect results. We look like champions. Now we're in a scenario where we just spent a lot of money subsoiling last fall, and we can't say that it was beneficial. But like all things in agriculture, we continue to push ourselves to learn, and we're not done with these trials yet. We're going to be continuing this trial a 3rd year. And we started that trial already, and we have subsoiled a field and left the section out. But what's different about next year's trial, and this is what the image on your screen is showing. This is the 3rd field that we subsoiled this fall, where we did not subsoil that 20 acres in the middle. We did come back over here on this map and fill this in. We did finish subsoiling the rest of the field. This was on wheat this year. So we had Starbuck wheat on field 19. And where we did not subsoil, we have significant amount regrowth. Here's a NDVI image from October 12th showing a significant higher degree of wheat growing. That is 6-leaf, fully tillered, almost boot stage, because we didn't have our killing frost till this week. And so the scenario that we're setting ourselves up to trial our subsoiling experiment next year is going to have additional factors playing into it. We had more crop growing where we didn't subsoil. So is that a detriment or is that a positive? We had more water pulled out of that area because we had more crop growing on it, more volunteers. Or is that a positive because we have more of a cover crop situation where we have live roots in the soil? We'll find out more next year, but to summarize this subsoiling trial after 2 years, 2019 subsoiling, we wish we could repeat those scenarios and do it all over again. In 2020, the fall of 2020 subsoiling, we question if what we did was worth it based on the conditions to follow. So that's my ramble on it, and probably didn't answer any questions for anyone. But just like any practice, any management practice, whenever you do something, there's a reaction. And if the environment doesn't cooperate with you after, it can be a positive or a negative. Such is farming and striving for higher yields. So a question is coming in, or a comment, and I'm just going to read it out loud for those who don't have the comments open. Is 3-year trial enough? Shouldn't it be 4 or 5? Just wondering this on a theory. At some point, you would no longer see impact from the past, either good or bad, depending on the growing conditions. Absolutely right. I probably shouldn't evaluate over just a 3-year period and give the thumbs up or the thumbs down. It should over a longer period. Ultimately, I mean, it's important to keep in mind what we're trying to achieve out of this. And that is, in our heavy clay soils, when we get down to 20 or 30 millimeters of moisture available every 10 centimeters in our soil, and we're starting to reach that permanent wilting point because the clays want to hold on to the water. How do we get the roots to go even deeper than that? And that's the challenge. That's what we're trying to achieve. Is that compaction layer enough to stop the roots from going down? Well, it depends on what's going on above. And that's why different growing years, this year was obviously a higher moisture stress environment. We didn't achieve what we wanted. Would we have saw a different result with just 2 or 3 inches more? The jury is still out. And the other question is, when we ever get back to quote unquote normal, is this subsoiling going to cause us management issues with our heavy equipment and ruts? We're going to find out. One question that always comes up a lot that I get feedback on is dry summers like this in heavy clay soils, we get big cracking. We can stick our forearm all the way down the hole. Is that down the soil, 2.5 feet very easily? Is that enough? Is it a bad thing? No, that's nature's way of breaking up compaction. The challenge with that is your soil structure is always going to crack in the area of least resistance, where there's a least amount of binding going on. So it's not going to be even and consistent across the field. It's a great thing when it happens, because we're getting the mixing of, some more developed clays and organic matter moving down into the profile and introducing microbial communities further down into the profile, which is important for nutrient cycles, so on and so forth. But it's not consistent across the field, I guess is my reply to that so far. So we're going to continue to do more of this in the future. We're going to have 3 different trials going on next year: 2019, 2020, and 2021 trial. We're going to have 6 different soil moisture probes in 3 different crops, and hopefully we can learn some more out of it. And so, you know, the big question going into next year, we know water is going to be our limiting factor. We know that I'm going to jump back to this slide right here that shows how much water is in our profile. We still have this probes in the ground, and we're going to leave them in as long as possible, so we have an indication of how much water we have in our soil going into the winter. At our farm, after these recent rains, we're only 1 inch away, 1 accumulated inch entering the soil profile away from equal amounts of moisture in the top 3.5 feet. So I'll repeat that. We get 1 more inch of water in our ground before freeze up. Any snow accumulation and water infiltration in the spring, we're going to be starting with more than 200 to 250 millimeters of available water in our soil. So hopefully we've got potential to be equal or better starting next year, better than we did this year from a yield potential standpoint. So I'm going to wrap up. Oh, I see comments coming in. I see Curtis asking a question or a comment. We subsoil to bring clay up. And that's an interesting, if this is the Curtis I'm thinking of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a Curtis that potentially deals with peat soils. And so what he's trying to do, I'm guessing, is incorporate more peat into, or more clay into his peat to create a little more of a mineral base and have more soil characteristics that are beneficial to crops that come out of clays than peats, which are water holding potential, temperature, consistency, and ability to just farm. So that's a really interesting point. Unfortunately, we're not rich in peat like Curtis is, but obviously it's something that he's done and it's worked for him. Very, very good comment. Thanks, Curtis. So I'm going to jump ahead to another topic that is on the front of everyone's mind, and that is soil residual nitrogen. This is a slide coming out of an AgVise paper that shows throughout Canada and the Midwest the number of soil samples that they have following wheat that have high nitrogen levels. And the top of the bars are always coming out of the drought years, and 1988 being the worst. And as you all know, our year had some parallels to 1988 through the growing season. And so what are we seeing for soil residual nitrogen in Manitoba? Well, this is a document, again, coming out of AgVise for 2021 by RM in Manitoba, or by area code, I should say. What percent of fields have greater than 100 pounds? And if you look on the very right side of that chart, you will see areas of Southeast Saskatchewan, Eastern Saskatchewan, or Southeast Manitoba, Eastern Manitoba, Northern Manitoba, the Interlake regions, showing anywhere from 30 to 40% of the fields following wheat have over 100 pounds of nitrogen available in the soil profile. So the next question we get is it available to the crop next year? Can I count on it? And there's no silver bullet answer to this. However, the short answer would be yes, you can. You can count on this nitrogen being available to your crop next year, depending on the environmental conditions that are going to come. So this next highlight is just only 10% of the fields in the Interlake and Central Manitoba have normal nitrogen levels. So only 1 in 10 fields behaved normal this year. So with fertilizer prices doing what they're doing, the piggy bank is full, my friends. The piggy bank is full. We had this show up on our farm in the fall of 2018, and this is what I want to highlight, because it wasn't that long ago we had a high soil residual nitrogens on our farm. And this is how we managed it. And I see some comments coming in on lazy soybeans, which is a perfect segue into this, because that chart, or the points that you're seeing on the left side of the screen, that's a field we sampled right after harvest, and it showed 95 pounds of residual nitrogen. That's a field we were planning to put soybeans on. So that was our concern. Are we going to have lazy nodules in our soybeans in the next year if we grow soybeans on a field that is 100 pounds of nitrogen? So we went out, we grabbed a GPS point in a field, and we sampled right before freeze up, October 19th. Soil sample came back just like the composite sample at 100 pounds of residual nitrogen. Okay, still there. So we stuck with our guns. We planted soybeans on the field, and that came from a lot of feedback from growers who have done it before, not from, I'm going to say, research. Research study showed don't put soybeans on that field. You're going to have lazy nitrogen, lazy nodules. But we know lots of growers who have high manure fields, high nitrogen fields in eastern Manitoba, and they grow soybeans on it, and they never have lazy nodules. So we went back to the same GPS point in the springtime, sampled, yep, 107 pounds of nitrogen. Went into July 5th, soil sampled that same spot, 116 pounds. It was all there. And so that was cool to see. We did seed soybeans on that field, and we double inoculated the soybeans, and we did not see any lazy nodules. The field yielded in 2019 35 bushel an acre soybeans, which was just above our farm average that year. Now, there's factors that affect the availability of that nitrogen next year based on when you soil sample and what's going to be available for next year. When did you soil test? Was it early in the fall, late in the fall? Now that we've had some moisture, water drives the mineralization cycle, and you're going to have a release of nitrogen because our soils are still warm when we had that. So if you sampled early before the rainfall, when our soils are still warm, in that August or September rain, you're probably going to have more nitrogen in that field than you think. So the next question is, how much of that is getting taken up by the crazy amounts of volunteer regrowth? I'm going to show you this picture here. This is a picture from our field in the bottom of the drain, showing, the canola in the bottom of the drain had a little more moisture. Oh, actually, no, sorry. That's not a bottom of a drain that you're seeing in that picture where there's no regrowth. That's where we did not have crop grow last year. That was an isolation strip. Now that I look at the picture, that was an isolation strip cultivated. That was the exact same picture and isolation strip that Steve showed of me forgetting my words in that video on our Clearfield canola field. And so in that strip, there was enough moisture because we had no crop growing there last year to finish the crop evenly. And so we had no regrowth there because that canola properly matured. Now, we're going to have less nitrogen available in that strip because we probably averaged 25 or 35 bushel an acre canola in that strip. So we would have taken more nitrogen out that we applied compared to beside where we yielded nothing or 5 or 6 bushel an acre, but we had a lot of regrowth. This canola regrowth, fields that look like this, regrowth volunteer canola that hit the flowering stage, depending on the density of the canola, it could, through a nitrate test, a vegetative nitrate test, have taken up anywhere from 90 to 190 pounds of nitrogen from your soil. So now that your nitrogen is out of your soil and in your volunteer growth, how much of that is going to be available next year? Well, it depends on how quick that straw or that volunteer growth breaks down from soil microbes next year. And that's going to depend on how much rainfall we get or how much moisture you have. Are you going to leave it on the surface? Are you going to incorporate it? the rates of mineralization are going to be driven by the water potential. And so we all know volunteer growth is not even across the field, and your nitrogen availability for next year's crop is not going to be available either, which brings you into the next world about making sure you've got a base rate of nitrogen, or looking at your field differently, thinking about variable rate nitrogen. The majority of growers in Eastern Manitoba are not doing variable rate nitrogen because of soil conditions and limitations and variations that we have. But if there's ever a time to look at it, variable rate nitrogen, this is the year you're going to be doing, because you have variable rate nitrogen with a residual nitrogen hangover. And depending on the topography of your field and the drainage of your field, different mineralization rates are going to take into account, are going to be affected by different water availability. So there's no easy answer to deal with high residual nitrogens, other than you need to trust what your soil sample is telling you, but think critically about how it's going to get tied up or how it's going to become available when you need it for that crop to grow. So that's a little bit of a ramble on managing nitrogen for next year. There's a couple comments coming in on conversations with peas and soybeans going back to high residual nitrogen. The Manitoba pulse growers, they do have a statement out saying anything greater than 60 pounds of residual nitrogen, you're setting yourself up to be potentially riskier for lack of nodulations, specifically in peas more than soybeans. The reality is, when you think about it from a simple standpoint, you want to make sure you've got the right inoculum strain in the soil right beside the seed, actively living in a high nitrogen environment. And so one way to manage that is double inoculating your peas or your soybeans to ensure that you have healthy strains of rhizobia right beside your seed. And I don't have any papers to support that statement. That's my disclaimer on that. But when you think about it from a practicality standpoint, it makes sense. So that's kind of my stance as of right now. I'm sure we're going to learn lots more by this time next year on if that's the right statement to make or not, but it can be done. Or we have done it on our farm in 2018 with soybeans. And when you think about how much nitrogen soybeans and peas needs, I believe, I'm going by memory, I believe soybeans are 7 pounds of nitrogen for every bushel you want to produce. So if you want to produce 40 bushel an acre, 40 by 7 is a very, very big number. You cannot apply that much nitrogen to your soybean crop. It will not be economical and it will not work. And with peas, it's a little lower, but I still want to say it's 3 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per bushel of peas that you want to produce. Again, spoon feeding nitrogen to your pea crop is not going to be economical if you have lazy nitrogens. So every field is different, but make sure you have healthy rhizobia going down with your seed if you're still seeding peas or soybeans into those scenarios. So thanks for your feedback and questions on double inoculating. Another comment came in on thoughts on in-season testing. You're absolutely right, Riley. There is no better way to know what the hell, pardon my language, is going on in your field unless you're in soil testing. Starting with soil sampling in the spring, soil sampling mid-spring, leading into soil sampling at right before your peak nitrogen uptake in each of your crops. So that could be in June or July, depending on your crop. And then it leads me into the next thing is tissue samples are the next way to indicate if you are lacking nitrogen in specific spots of your field. But when you're doing it, make sure you keep in mind the topography of your field and how much regrowth that field had last year. And if that nitrogen is going to be available or how you managed it. If you didn't have any regrowth, that nitrogen is just sitting there because it's dry. So if you have a question, get an agronomist out there, get it sampled, and that's the only way to really tell the full story of what's going on. This is a discussion that is going to be debated all winter. So this is just the start of it, and I'm sure we're going to learn lots more. Speaking of conversations that are going to be talked about this winter, we're bringing in live Katie Magnuson, joining us from what looks like she's taken over my office at work. She's going to talk about some herbicide carryover watchouts for this year coming out of last year. Take it away, Katie.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Laird's office is freezing this morning, so I hope everybody else is staying cozy today. Yeah, so I'm here to talk a little bit about herbicide carryover risk this year. It's not a new conversation that we didn't get a lot of rainfall, and so just going to go through that a little bit here. Was definitely seeing a bit of this residual carryover symptoms in fields this year with canola on pea stubble down in the southwest corner. So it's going to be something to watch out for again, especially on lighter land. So when we're looking at herbicide carryover risk, your herbicides are broken down by various processes, mostly by soil microbes binding to your soil particles, chemical reactions, and then they can be lost through volatilization, light degradation, and leaching. These breakdown factors will be favored by warm, moist soil conditions, as most soil processes are. And then your carryover risk is going to increase with low percent organic matter, low soil pH, and low moisture, for example, eroded knolls and lighter soil types. So the illustration that I have here on the screen is just showing your percent herbicide remaining in the soil in weeks following application, and it will decrease in an exponential pattern over the weeks. And it's just showing that in a wet year, it will decrease much faster, reaching a point where it would be safe to plant a susceptible crop at, for example, 20 weeks. These are not hard numbers. This is just an illustration. And then in a drought year, it will be significantly slower, causing your point where you could plant a susceptible crop to be 2 to 3 times longer than if you had a good season. Can carry on. So these are just some maps from Manitoba Agriculture for you to get a rough look at for total accumulation of precipitation just in the month of July. There were areas that only had 5 to 10 millimeters and nothing more than 93. And yeah, so the central part of the province is definitely looking a lot drier. And as you move into August, we did get that good rain in August, so that bumped us up a little bit. And then if you're looking at the whole season from May to October, there are areas at a minimum of 174 millimeters. In general, we're looking for 175 millimeters of accumulated rain from June till the end of August. And so there are definitely some areas that do not qualify for that, and that you really need to be checking your records that are specific to your farm to see if you might be at risk for carryover, and checking your labels, talking to your local reps. And moving on to these slides, this is just a percent of normal over the 30-year average. Yeah, June, you can see the western part of the province isn't too far off, but as we move into July, everybody's looking pretty low compared to normal. And then I think the next one there, is August, which again, this is just for the month of August. We're looking closer to normal or greater than normal for rainfall in August. All right, we can move on there later. For your herbicide carryover injury symptoms, they can look very similar to environmental or pest injury symptoms that you will see. So it's important to be out there checking and and kind of comparing to your notes about what happened in that field. For example, the photo here, you're actually one too far ahead there, Larry. Can you go back one? Thank you. The photo there is a photo of one of Petura's fields here that was a pea field. This year had Authority Supreme on it. This was mentioned previously in the presentation. And we're definitely seeing some herbicide residual issues from the group 15 in that product. On the headlands in particular, this is a field that I drive by every day and was noticing this very sharp angle at the corner, at the southwest corner. And so I kind of asked Connor about it, and he said it was a sprayer issue in that event. So important to keep that in your records as well, that any sort of sprayer issues as well.
And all it took was it was the first pass of the year on the first field, and the valve setting wasn't right, and all it took was a 2 times rate on the headland. On the second headland, noticed it, and that 2 times rate was just enough to obviously suppress the 1 bushel an acre oats that we seeded into that pea stubble for a cover crop.
Yes. And so just can you go back to that other one still for a little bit longer there? This will typically show up after a soaking rain event. So the first big rains that we're going to get after a dry cycle will release the herbicide from the soil particles that it's bound to, and will make it available for plants to take up. So in season, if you get a soaking rain event, then your symptoms will start showing up in plants that are already established, or if they're germinating, they'll start showing symptoms then as well. It can follow patchy patterns of soil variability in your field and can be very different plant to plant compared to, for example, fertilizer deficiency symptoms and other examples. All right, we can carry on. As a couple of larger watchouts that were highlighted by Manitoba Agriculture. So Kim is the weed specialist at Manitoba Agriculture. She has a Weed Wednesday webinar on YouTube that is a really great resource on this topic. And she's an excellent resource to have. So highlighting group 2s in terms of herbicide carryover, your broadleaves with group 2 injury are typically going to show discoloring at their new growth, as well as stunting. So you can see on that canola plant there's some yellow, red, and purple showing up. Your IMIs are one of the main watchouts there. Your Solo, Viper, Odyssey, Aries, Salute, things applied on legume crops. You hopefully all would have received the BASF urgent notice that came out in specific to their products. IMIs are requiring greater than 125 millimeters of accumulated rainfall from June to the end of August for soil zones in Manitoba, and watching out with recropping canola, durum wheat, and canary seed. So if you have pea ground that you have applied one of these products on, and you have received less than 5 inches of rain or close to 5 inches of rain, definitely start watching out for that and considering your rotation there. Your sulfonylureas will show up carryover on high pH soils, and your flucarbozones such as your Everest and Sierra, those can show up, and there's in particular field pea restriction on fields sprayed with Everest or Sierra. They require a minimum of 4 inches of rain in the 60 days following application. So just be very cautious there as well. Moving on to our group 4 injuries, that's going to show some abnormal growth, your cupping twisting on broadleaves, and your clopyralids are something in particular to watch out for. Your legumes in a following crop are going to be particularly sensitive. They are requiring greater than 140 millimeters from June to August, and greater than 175, so 7 inches of rain over the whole growing season before you want to plant any legumes after a crop sprayed with a product like this. So I meant at the start to kind of engage in the chat there. If anybody has been seeing any carryover symptoms with certain products or in certain crops, you can throw that in the chat so that we as a group can kind of be aware of ones that people have seen recently. if at all. In terms of what you can do about your herbicide carryover, record keeping is going to be the most important. As I emphasized before, keeping track of your rainfall, keeping track of what herbicides you use, dates of application is really important, and following your label. The other thing that you can do if you do start to see strange symptoms in your field that you think might reflect these patterns is you can consult any agronomist, or Laird says you can specifically consult me, which you can, and I will try to help find answers for you as well. So
Yeah, snuck that one in on you. Call Katie. She'll get you the answers. Thanks, Katie. Not seeing any discussion in the group chat there yet. I'm going to continue on as per normal. Laird time, when combined with the presentation, we're running slightly over. So I'm going to fast forward into one topic and not dive too deep into it, other than share what we did on our farm. Previous years, there's been a lot of debate on in dry conditions when disease risk is not high, are fungicides worth it? And leading up to this year, the answer that we learned on our farm is even when disease pressure was not high, we were still seeing a yield increase from adding fungicides such as Fusarium head blight timing products and Sclerotinia products to our canola, and flag leaf products to cereals. Always seeing a minimum of a yield increase in terms of our costs back. And there's great debate on if you're just getting your costs back, is it worth it? This year, that debate was even heated more. We did Mirvis Ace and Procero on our wheat, and we double applied Mirvis Ace in one spot and had one untreated check. And these are results pulled from our combine monitor. We specifically only had one combine in this area of the trial with a fungicide. We evaluated it with the Farm Forward program, keeping in mind, obviously, the margin of error potential when calculating yield results from a combine monitor. But we did see and feel that there was still a benefit in 50 bushel wheat by applying a fungicide at Fusarium head blight timing. And I'll back it up and say we had no Fusarium head blight, but if this is what we saw at Fusarium head blight timing, the best thing we should have done is applied a flag leaf product on our wheat acres earlier on, so you have a chance for that fungicide to do more for your crop in terms of developing yield increases. That is the stance that we currently have, even this after this year, that it paid for itself with a yield increase. As we move into canola, different story. We only sprayed one strip and saw no yield increase with a fungicide in canola when your canola yields 14 to 15 bushels an acre on that piece of field. So moving ahead, there's comment about growth regulators. We've done many growth regulation trials. We used Modus this year on 2 different wheat fields, one on Starbuck wheat that had manure applied and one on Starbuck that had high rates of nitrogen applied. We applied it after we got that June 10th rain, and we had great potential. However, the tap shut off, no more rain, no more risk of lodging, and no yield advantage to these trials on both the hog manure and the high nitrogen fields. I'm flying through these. Please reach out to me in person in any form, and we can dive into these deeper on what we saw. I am speeding through them out of respect of your time. Invita, lots of conversation around Invita, product coming to the marketplace that is increasing the nitrogen availability to all crops So we had it demoed on soybeans this year. And again, the evaluation showed in 10 bushel soybeans, no gain or loss. Tough year to do some of these product additive trials, including Invita, including Bionic Q, which is a seed treatment that is a mycorrhiza, which is a nitrogen fixing bacteria and is a phosphate fixing bacteria to try to improve early season vigor in oats, is what we did it on. Again, these products can go on just about any crop. They're everywhere in the marketplace. Expect to see more of them. And this was in our oat field, treated versus untreated, north versus south. Again, statistically, no relevance to compare throughout the field. No difference in vigor and emergence in the spring. One tidbit I want to share with you, because I'm going to skip over the next the slide where I talk about it. Soil, I'll back up. Snow catching. On every one of our fields that had a road on the north side, where in the wintertime, no snow accumulation would collect because we had no stubble. The first 100 to 200 yards on the north side of the field that had a road on the north side always yielded less because there was no snow catch and there was decreased amount of water availability. And I want to highlight this on this oat field, the north side of this 320 acres of Summit Oats. You've seen the field before. This was our subsoiling trial. There's our subsoiling trial down here on the south quarter. And on the north side of the field, that north 10 acres, never had any snow sit. The wind comes over, it's turbulent, it's twisting, it comes down, it blows snow off the first X amount of yards, and we're seeing a decreased yield. So let's work to increase our snow capture. Think about that, please. Growers, zero till is not new. It should not be exciting. It is a proven concept. And I'm not saying to do it or you have to do it, but let's look at what zero till brings to the table to help capture more snow and more moisture. And in these drought conditions, hopefully capture more yield. I know when I said that, it probably sounded like I was standing on a bit of a pedestal. And I don't want to sound that way, but we need to think about changing our management practices because we're not in the same cycle we were 10 years ago. I say that because I honestly want to see less soil blowing at the end of the day. Early seeded wheat. There's a really nice video that you can find on YouTube. Long story short, early seeded wheat this year, lots of guys did it. Lots of guys really liked it, but it was only value added if you got the rainfall at the right time. But the theory behind it is still sound. That's a field of Rowan that head was coming out of the boot on June 10th in that picture. We were still in the longest days of the year and about to begin flowering. In fact, it did flower before the summer solstice. So this is what we want to accomplish in order to maximize our yield. And for the most part, it was all positive feedback and no real negative consequences from seeding in early April this year. Seed quality. Seed quality is challenged in some areas of the province this year, depending on that area. This is a sample of soybeans that came out of one of the more challenged areas of Manitoba. And so something to keep in mind when handling seed next year, and keep in mind when talking to your seed supplier about what seed quality you're going to be getting. Wheat, it's a little smaller than normal, but beautiful, beautiful kernels that we harvested this year, and most of our seed growers did. Canola, seed quality in canola, a lot of guys saw this in Manitoba. Obviously, this isn't for seed production reasons, but abscisic acid ratios within your canola plant in drought conditions can cause the seed to germinate in the pod And it's something you only see in extreme drought conditions. We saw a lot of it this year with growers. When your canola seed can germinate, it's not from being wet. It's from an imbalance of hormones in that seed, tells it to germinate. Something kind of neat. Oats, a lot of thin oats, a lot of green oats coming in out of the tougher areas. And important to think about seed weight and seed size when you're seeding this spring, because it will drastically affect your population. Specifically in peas, a lot of growers are going to be able to seed just 3 bushel an acre and probably being able to seed 10 seeds per square foot in order to maximize your plant stand. Dry pea seed, obviously developed in the heat of the drought in a lot of areas of eastern Manitoba. There's pockets that are phenomenal seed quality for peas this year, and we've got some of those lots in our bin, luckily. But there's also lots out there that are going to look like this, and you want to talk about and think about what that seed quality is like and how it's going to affect your seeding rate for next year. I'm going to skip through midge. I'm going to skip through soil management and managing blowing, because I think everyone is aware of it. When I travel the countryside, I see a difference in management type, and I'm excited what that's going to bring, what opportunity that's going to bring next spring. So we're continuing to challenge status quo on field preparation and management. And we've had a lot of regrowth and a lot of cover crops that are changing the way we're doing things for next year. So I'm excited to see the outcomes of it. And I'm excited to see what lessons we're going to learn of it next year. Because I know there's going to be some segments on it in our 2022 agronomy grower meeting. So that brings me to the last slide. And I skipped over some others and hid some others. But thank you for sticking with me and through this agronomy grower meeting virtually. I'm glad those from further away could tune in and take it in without a big time commitment. We do look forward to the day when we will be doing 4 or 5 of these agronomy grower meetings in person. Moving forward for the next month, our team at Pea Seeds is going to be doing small, private, individual agronomy grower meetings in different regions of Manitoba, bringing 5 or 6 farmers together from a different area and going through this presentation and hopefully creating some valuable discussion. Thank you for listening to our year in review, our report card, which included some good, some bad, and a lot of ugly. And really look forward to getting out there in the field next year alongside you and setting ourselves up for success in the 2022 growing season. So on behalf of Pea Seeds, thank you very much for your business, and we look forward to working with you in the future. We'll conclude the formal part of the meeting and take the record button off